Well, let's get to the meat of the story today. I can't wait for us to talk about this. The Observer has a whole write up about what was real and what wasn't with Hogan and Savage. Here's what's written. There was certainly speculation, and being wrestling, there would be, that the Hogan Savage thing was a work on their part without letting the company in on it. I just don't think it was, Dave wrote. I'd go so far as to say I'm pretty sure on this one. The idea that Savage would walk out just a few hours before showtime, causing them to have to rewrite the entire show, which Savage was prominently figured into, makes me think that isn't the case. Although if it is, nobody believes the company was a part of it. Also, if it was, they would have gone at it in public to try and fool people like DDP and Buff Bagwell and WCW, as opposed to Savage quitting and making himself look so bad. Savage and TNA officials were back talking on November 10th after Savage had no-showed and came to terms a few days later that Savage would return. And when the 11/16 show was over, they'd officially announced Savage and Hardy and AJ Styles versus Jarrett, Hall, and Nash as the main event for the Turning Point pay-per-view on December 5th, which will be from Universal Studios in Orlando. I can't believe this is real, but Jeff, here's what Dave wrote. Savage has demanded that Jimmy Hart stay away from him the entire time he's there, or else he wouldn't come. Being that Jimmy Hart is such an intimidating figure, I guess. Hart had a nasty confrontation a year or so back on the Mancow show with Savage when they argued about Hogan. I'll be honest, I don't remember Jimmy Hart and Savage arguing on Mancow. Maybe we'll find that and post it on social if we can find it. But the speculation is always there. Was it real? Was it a work? We ask that about a lot of things that we hear that happen backstage in wrestling. It's one of the beautiful things about wrestling. But what say you? I can't imagine a scenario where this was, I mean, there's no way this was a work, right, Jeff?
No. I mean, you can't say it was, but no, I don't believe it was a work. Here's Conrad. This is,
let me give you this before you go.
Yeah.
Brian Adams, who is Savage's current running buddy, that's the former Crush, in case you're keeping up, not the singer.
And he passed away.
Was on Cowhead's radio show in Tampa and criticized how the Jarretts have treated Savage. He said they snuck Savage into the building to keep his appearance a secret, but then Hogan walked in where fans could see he was there, and everyone made a big deal about Hogan being there when they knew Savage hated him. He said the Jarretts knew it was unprofessional. I guess Savage felt if he was there, that nobody he doesn't like should be allowed to be there, or it's unprofessional. Like, this sounds like, man, what are we even doing? Aren't we trying to sell tickets and make money? This is a bunch of petty bullshit 8th grade girl infighting. That's the way it reads to me as a 43-year-old man who wasn't there. What do you make of all this?
Well, so here's to kind of dive into this. So this is November of 2005, right? Yeah.
2004.
2004 or 2005?
2004.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm getting the year. Anyway. Yes. Because we had been there 2 months. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting the year. But anyway. So I would say one of the 10 to 12 to 15, the last couple of months, we were in the asylum in Nashville. The Carters had, they never would give a real clear answer on this time, but me and my father went and found another potential investor. And, well, not potential. He was ready to rock and roll. And we found out in that meeting, and not far after that, that Panda wasn't going anywhere and had no interest in not even partnering, not even letting somebody come on at all. That was great news to me, because it cemented that, hey, they're in this for the long haul. I think my father had a lot of mixed emotions on a lot of things. This was, it's no secret that the TNA business specifically drove a big wedge in between me and him. He wasn't exactly happy with, I'll call it, my business decisions, not just creative, but kind of across the board. I get him. He's an alpha male. He wanted to run the show. or had always run the show when he had run business. So he had the connection and the relationship with Savage. And he also went back years, and it's been said that, I mean, Hogan and my father had a relationship. And when Hogan went to WCW, I think he's the one who told Eric, hey, call Jarrett, put him under a consulting deal. So I had that relationship. So I don't really know all the ins and outs. Nobody really knows except Savage and Jarrett, and now they're both passed, about it exactly. But it doesn't sound, even reading it 20 years later, none of it really jives up that Hogan and look, how bad did they really hate each other? Like you just said, okay, so they're going to go public, and Jimmy Hart and Savage are going to get in a spat on a radio show. That smells of a work. Brian Adams, me and him, me and him used to go get sushi together, and him to kind of publicly call us out. That doesn't smell right. None of it, but it's one of those deals that maybe they're working their own program, and Hogan may be working a program for Vince McMahon, and Savage may be working a program to try to create leverage for Jarrett with Bob Carter. None of it really adds up. It's to me a much ado about nothing. I was trying to, I'll call it, run a company. But man, here we are 20 years later, still talking about it.
I know we didn't have these types of phrases, or maybe we did. It just wasn't in our everyday language and the lexicon of what we talk about here in America. But do you think Savage just had really, really poor emotional intelligence with the benefit of hindsight? I mean, for him, this is just, hey, I can't see Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart, I better not see him. Like, what?
Well, I considered me and Randy, I don't want to call us, because I was such a fan of him, so I don't want to call us that we were ever tight, but we were buds. But him and my father, they had been legit worn back, and they knew each other on a level like not many guys do, because when you fight against each other and literally there's guns involved and arrest involved and police and bodyguards and just all that kind of mess they went in. And then they had a great working relationship. They were tight. And my father would say, to the day he dies, he's never met a man that was more paranoid than Randy. Paranoid in life, not about just one situation or another, but across the board. And he always thought that he got it from his father, that Randy was, that it was like a family trait, just the lack of trust of life.
Well, let me ask you, I don't mean to cut you off, but did you spend any time with Lanny? Do you think Lanny was that way too? Because I've never heard that about Lanny.
No, I've never, no. And I hadn't spent a lot of time with Lanny, but nicest guy in the world, very professional. But it goes without saying, you can just hear both of them talk. I'm not talking about promos, but just hear, they are two different human beings. We're two different human beings in so many ways. Lanny, the poetry was a side of him, but he was much more soft-spoken. So I may be completely wrong, but I always looked at it that Lanny was like his mom, Randy was like the dad. That's how I took it.
You mentioned the war, and some of our younger listeners may not know this, but once upon a time, the Poffos ran a quote unquote outlaw promotion that went to absolute war and was calling out your dad's promotion. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. Your dad, I guess, won, however you want to say that, and they did some business together. And then Savage launched into the WWF and became a megastar. But when you guys were at war, had you heard, for lack of a better word, that Lanny could toot his own horn? Is that something that people knew back then, that he could toot his own horn?
Silva, I'd love to see the look on your face right now, because we went from a war discussion, guns, territories,
to tooting your own horn.
Yeah. That was such a beautiful, as a masterpiece. Last week you did a transition that it caught me so quickly, I didn't even know what happened. You said one thing, and the next thing you know, you're talking about strutting and dancing. Today you went from, blasting horns to tooting horns. in a matter of a breath, Conrad. How do you do that?
Well, I've always wondered, how did Lanny do it? Because I can't. I mean, when I was a younger man, I tried. Have you tried, Jeff? And were you able to toot your own horn?
I'm not a big. I mean, Scotty,
You're not a horn tooter?
Well, you know, I don't like to toot my own horn.
Well, I know Arn Anderson did, and he would say toot, toot. I mean, he's talked about it on TV. I'm just wondering, do you remember that ever being a discussion, or did that talk not happen until much later? Because I remember Ric Flair telling Peggy, who was a legendary Mid-Atlantic fan, come here, and showing her that Lanny could do that. So that would have predated, his ascent as the genius or leaping Lanny Poffo in the WWF. So it makes me think it existed back then. But I feel like when there is a war with an outlaw territory, you guys are going to be hammering that. You can't trust those guys. That guy toots his own horn.
So let hear me out on this. Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage, they are biological brothers, same dad, same mom, right?
Yep.
To your knowledge, I don't think I've ever seen a window card, a poster, a pay-per-view advertisement. Randy has been in the main event his entire career, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Lanny, on the other hand, I know in Memphis, he, had a couple of different runs and this and that, but he was really mid-card. I say this with diplomacy, mid-card at best, maybe opening match guy. So out of the two, who do you think had more of a legitimate ability to toot their own horn? Who do you think was the horn tooter out of those two, or should have been?
I mean, I think Savage was such a big star, he could get a line of people to line up to toot his horn for him.
I can't. We got to transition.
What? What? I'm not moving on until you tell me if you remember there being discussion about Lanny in the war.
Oh Lord,
being a horn tooter.
Angelo, literally, maybe to this day or for a long time, held the record for the most consecutive sit-ups ever. And I mean, so I know way back then.
Is that how Lanny learned how to do it? Doing all those sit-ups like his dad?
Lanny was tooting his own horn the day that I heard or saw Angelo, and Angelo told me the story in the dressing room. I'm positive.
What, you saw Lanny toot his own horn?
No,